Hi, welcome to Beginning Engineers. Today I'm going to be talking about the time study again, but I'm going to be going into more examples. This video was requested by Vishwendra Singh. My apologies if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. I think part of the reason that this video was requested is because doing time studies in the beginning, you can be pretty nervous about it. You're not sure if you're doing it right, you don't exactly know what to look for. Well, there really is only one way to get better and more confident with your time studies: practice. As you begin interacting with people in the work environment, you'll really develop a script for how you like to approach people, explain what you are doing, reassure them that you're not trying to take away their job and that your job is all about helping. You'll get better at asking questions and whatever else becomes relevant in your position. It's really important. Don't expect to understand a bit of someone's job just by watching it for 10 minutes. Even experienced engineers know it can take more time to really get familiar with what someone is doing in order to properly study it. You'll get faster, but you're not going to know initially. Even if you're super experienced, you can't look at something for 3 minutes and understand what is going on. So going into our examples, we need to recap some of the tools you're going to be using when performing a time study. It's important to understand that all tasks can be broken down into observable, measurable movements. These small steps are generally known as third legs. A lot of people just call them movements. Some examples of them are on the right. So someone can search for something, they can find it, they can select it, they can grasp it, they can hold on to it, you can position things. There's all sorts of examples. Even the most complex tasks, you can break down into all these little individual movements: reach, grasp, hold, position. You'll see what I mean later on. It's also important to have a clear physical set point that triggers each element. An element is a step in your time study. You want the trigger to be something obvious, like hand touching bolt, hand touching lever. Machine light comes on. Things that no one can argue about. Say you make the start of your step, move into position in front of lathe. How do you define the position exactly? How do you know if they're 90% in the position or 100%? Do you see how there could be some confusion with what starts a step? If you make it a clear, set, physical trigger point, it's much easier to time. Standard times should only be set through averages obtained from realistic data. So don't only time the fastest person on the machine, the fastest assembler. But then, on the flip side, don't just time the slowest people. Time a few people that aren't the fastest and aren't the slowest and average those times together. Then you will get a true idea of how long something should take. And I think this is the most important step. Make sure you speak to the people you are studying before you just begin. Build rapport and ask many questions. That helps lead to additional things to study and collect data on. You might be talking to someone and they might say, "Oh, this part of the machine's broken, so it takes us twice as long." Guess what? If you didn't talk to them and build that relationship, they probably wouldn't have told you that. Also, if you really let them know you're there to standardize things and help their lives become easier, they're actually going to work more comfortably and more realistically. If you don't talk to them and they're nervous the whole time, they're not going to go their average pace. And that image at the bottom is just a worksheet showing how you would collect some times. So on the far left, outside the image, you would write down the element. You would put the trigger at the top, and then below it, you would write the actual step. So touches rope would be the trigger that starts that step. Then the actual step would be wraps around lever. Then, below those numbered boxes, you would write down how long it takes each time. So below number 1, the first time you observe it, you write it down. Or realistically, after you've watched them do it for a little while. Then, when it comes back around to that trigger point, so you know the exact time the step starts, you would write down the time in the box below the 2. So are you just waiting for that step, known as an element, to come around again before you can time it? No, you would watch the process a few times, write down all the triggers and elements on the left, then you could follow it through. So see a trigger, start your watch. See the next trigger, lap your watch, record the next time, and keep working your way down. Then, at the very end, the last trigger should match the trigger at the very top. That completes the cycle. If your end is the same thing that starts it, you know you've captured every step. So you work your way from top to bottom, left to right, collecting the same element times again and again and again, and then you build averages. Alright, let's actually look at a couple of examples and see how you would begin to time someone doing a task. We'll start by watching it a few times, noticing the elements, determining our trigger points, and then pretending we take times. Alright, so I always think it's fun to start with something maybe you've never seen before. So something that at first kind of looks confusing, but then as you watch it again and again, you begin to get a feel for it. And while you might be looking at this and say, making noodles isn't confusing. Sure, but if you only watched it once, could you remember exactly what this lady was doing? Probably not, right? You would know the general flow, but not the exact specifics. I think the first thing I really notice is trigger points when I look at something. So what's catching your eye with this? Well, she's reaching the pile of noodles, but then she grabs these two different bottles, sprays them on, and then she goes back to work. If you're quicker than me, and I've seen this probably 4 or 5 times now editing this, you might have noticed just looking at it once or twice, she's grabbing some sort of like seasoning as well. Look, right now. See that? That's pretty quick. You might not notice that unless you watch the process a few times. That's why you don't want to rush into a time study. And if you want, you can even ask the person what they're doing if it seems really complicated. Have them walk through it once really slow, and that will help get you up to speed. And now that we've seen this a few times, maybe we can set some triggers. Touches spatulas to giant pile of noodles. Grabs bottle of darker liquid. Grabs bottle of clear liquid. Grabs handle to seasoning. Touches spatulas to cooking surface. With all those trigger points, and then of course the last one would be touches pile of noodles. That would start the cycle again. We can begin to break down each step of what she's doing. So let's say the darker liquid is soy sauce, and then let's say she's throwing salt on it. Are you ready to point out the triggers in the next cycle? Get ready. Let's do it as soon as she touches the noodles. Alright, touches big pile, so start your watch there. Okay, touches soy sauce. Touches water, that'd be a quick element. Touches handle to seasoning. Touches first spatula to grilling surface, or cooking surface. So if we watched her do this in real life a few times, we might notice she's only touching one spatula to the cooking surface first. Then we would just say, a spatula touches the cooking surface, not both, and really it wouldn't matter which one touches first. And not that she's touching both to the surface, she does, but after putting that seasoning on, one of them touches first. You have to make sure you start your timer exactly when you see that trigger point. So you gotta be quick when those triggers show up. And generally, you categorize something by the elements, but you begin to see elements as a series of movements, as a series of third legs. So what's she doing here? She's doing a lot of reaches, a lot of grasping, and that's about it. Not a whole lot of searching because the equipment is already really well set up. But imagine if she had all these different types of noodles. You might see her hesitate at first. She might have to search for the right type, whatever the customer ordered, then select it. So using tools such as 5S and tool placement, we can help speed up certain things. Say that at a certain time, customers were always getting a rice noodle. We can make the rice noodles center in her field of vision. That would be a good 5S tool that would speed up her time. And we would only catch that through time studies. So you begin to see how a lot of these tools interact. Oh, and you know what's funny? I've watched this like 15 times now, and I'm only just noticing the noodles are different. So maybe if you're watching her cook different dishes, you'll notice that some of the noodles take longer. This is when you begin to separate out your time studies and say, these are the average times for pad thai. These are the average times for a different noodle dish. Then you can say, well, on an average day you have this many pad thais and this many of another dish. You can begin to get averages for how long her workday should take and how long it should take her based on what the customer is ordering. This really helps you plan things. Getting sick of watching someone make noodles? Let's move on then. We'll go a little quicker with this final example, just in the interest of time. Okay, from a high level, what do we have here? This looks like a guy spray painting a surfboard. I know that because that was the title of the video that I downloaded. But if it's a piece of equipment you're not familiar with, and your manager didn't say, hey, go time study XYZ part, you're going to have to talk to the person to figure out what exactly they're doing. That's another benefit to talking to people. It fills you in much quicker than searching for the info all by yourself. So, how would you describe what this person is doing using triggers? Well, you could say squeeze trigger, literally, it's the trigger to the spray paint gun in this scenario, and then say hold and sweep paint gun. Then you could say let go of trigger, which normally it's hard to tell when someone lets go of something, but in this case, not seeing the spray might be a good trigger. So unless it's a super obvious letting go, or you see something drastically change, look for more obvious triggers. But in this case, we can tell the spray stops. Now this is probably more of a free-form job that this guy is performing, but assume that you're spray painting the same part again and again. You would want to count each spray, so trigger, see spray, trigger, spray, stops. You could put the moves in between if you're interested in that. So when the spray is not spraying, maybe the person's moving. You could call that element a move. Then see spray, that starts the next element, and you could call that element painting. And you would just record all of those. Then say at the end of the part, the guy has to walk back and touch the spray gun to something. That would be the final step. Well, actually, no, it wouldn't be, because think about it. Say he reloads the gun, or he changes paint, something like that. Then he has to walk back to either a new part or the same part and start spraying again. That could completely loop the task. So you'll notice I kind of stumbled through describing this one. That is because I did the voiceover for this video a bit sooner than I did for the other one. So I've only seen it a few times as well. But let's look at the next cycle together. Trigger, spray, stop, trigger, spray, trigger, stop, trigger, stop, trigger, spray, trigger, stop, trigger, spray. You might have to move to see what he's doing. These not spray triggers that start the steps of him repositioning, those are pretty quick. So for this job, you might not want to capture those. Maybe you would wait for the spray to restart again after stopping. So you could just, every time you see it first start, that could be a trigger. And you could call each one of those a paint stroke. There is an obvious step though that's pretty easy to catch right away. Let's look at the end and see how he walks back to a hook of some sort. It's good to consider too, maybe he's spraying different parts. So you could have the trigger be when you see paint touch a certain part. Okay, see at the end, he walks back. So you could say, spray gun touches hook. And that could be the trigger that ends that cycle. And then when he touches it again, it starts the next cycle. Maybe it's another part he's spraying. And what he's doing in between touching it down and grabbing it again, maybe that's some sort of prepare station or prepare tools, or move completed part to holding area, something like that. But you can begin to get a feel for, no matter what someone is doing, you see the triggers, you describe what they're doing, you watch it a few times to really get a feel for it, then you begin taking times. I hope these examples helped. I know sometimes you might be watching my videos and you might wonder, how is this actually applied in industry? You know, if I'm a working professional, how do I apply these things? So hopefully these videos really gave you an idea of how you would take these concepts and apply them to the physical world. So if you even have a watch and you want to try timing how long these people take, you can begin to get a feel for how long certain times are. But these ideas that you've learned today, you can take forward and apply to so many different operations. It's a really useful skill to be able to know how to time study. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, press the like button. If you want to see more of my videos, check out my channel or subscribe. Have a great day!